recording.
I'd like to call the meeting of the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I do have a flag this evening. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you, everybody. I do want to make note that tonight our meeting is being live streamed and recorded via the Zoom webinar platform. And this is in accordance with Governor Baker's June 16th, 2021 law and act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. So we are operating under the virtual protocol based on that executive order. For the record, I want to announce who is on the call. From the school committee, we have Mrs. Smith, Mr. Mason, Ms. Niamchura, I'm going to try for the correct pronunciation, Mrs. French, and myself, Mrs. Hughes. From the school district, we have our superintendent, Dr. Casavant, our assistant superintendent, Kate Calise, our business manager, Anne Marie Geister, our admin executive assistant extraordinaire, Susan Varney. And we also have on our call this evening from the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, Mac Reed and Jay Berry, who are facilitating our Regional Agreement Amendment Committee and are here this evening to give us a presentation on what that committee has been up to. First up on our agenda, the first two items of regular business, the minutes from the meeting of December 15th will be presented at our next school committee meeting so that everybody has an appropriate ability and chance to review them. And bills and payroll, there's nothing for this meeting to go over that we need to review. So those will be over. So we can get right into our appearance by Mr. Reed and Mr. Barry from the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools. I'll turn it over to Dr. Casavant if you want to do maybe a quick introduction and level setting, and then they can get to the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I do need to speak just a touch about being remote. As of yesterday, we were planning on having a regular meeting, and quite frankly, we just have so many close contacts that it just made sense to go virtual, especially, being in the Kiva, and, we're utilizing every space in the high school. So I just wanted to make sure I just said that for the record, because it was a very quick decision that had to be made around noon or 1 o'clock today. So I appreciate everyone's flexibility. Gosh, it really does seem like that I spoke with Mac and Jay in regards to the regional agreement. And a lot of that had to do with COVID. It really kind of put a halt to things. But the regional agreement has been, as folks certainly know on this committee and beyond, a point of contention. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's out of date. It's in some areas statutorily, it's not compliant. And I don't, and depending on who you speak to, it doesn't represent the will or the wish of one or both of the member towns. So Mac and Jay have been charged with the formidable task of bringing all three groups together and really working systematically through the existing, which is we're utilizing the 2004 regional agreement, through the agreement to gain consensus from the RAC committee. And I think they've done a fantastic job. Quite frankly, it's been a long road, but hopefully we've gained enough momentum that we'll be able to maybe, hopefully, I keep adding that word, right? Come to a place where we can, present a unified draft regional agreement. So with that being said, I turn it right back to you, Madam Chair, or to Mac and Jay, whoever would like to start moving forward.
I'll throw it over to Mac and Jay. And I know that I think Susan, you'll be handling the presentation once we're ready. So the floor is someone else's for now.
Well, thank you. Actually, Susan and I have agreed that I'm going to share my screen. So we'll see how that goes. I'd say before, before my screen gets filled up, when it happens, I can't see anybody else on the screen. So if someone has a question, raising your hand won't help, but maybe Jay could help with that, or Margaret, but just shout out if you'd like me to stop and ask a question about something, because I won't be able to see your hand. So let me open this up here. Actually, that isn't true. I can see some of you on the right side of my screen. So I guess if the right people are showing there, I could see your hand if it's raised. So thank you. We're happy to be here to kind of give you an update of what we've been doing so far. So I know the school committee doesn't need to know what a regional agreement is, but in case other people are viewing this from the community, that's just the basic outline is that it is how the towns and the school district interrelate with each other. It's a legal agreement that just kind of outlines how things are supposed to work between the three entities. Your first regional agreement was in 1955, and then it was amended in 77. And actually, I don't know how 1998, that's my fault somehow. I thought I had that taken out of there, but so 55, 77, and 2004, each of those times both of your communities supported the amendments to the regional agreement. And now obviously we're working in and we've been working on the 2004 version, but it could have been any of the versions because basically we can start over. So it's basically an opportunity to update your agreement based on Mass General laws, which have changed since 1977 and 2004. Also to update any regulations from DESE, and also whatever your district is doing maybe differently now than it was doing in 2004 or 1977. It brings into the real time your current policies and your procedures. We have a very well represented committee. It's called the Regional Regional Agreement Amendment Committee, affectionately known as the RAC. Somehow that's seems a kind of an odd name for it, but we are the RAC. And it's very well represented because it has your school committee members on it. It has your select board representatives, advisory committee, and at-large members. There are 5 voting members from each town, and there's some additional members who attend the meeting representing each of your towns. Also attending those meetings are your superintendent, Cassavant, your business manager, Anne-Marie Geister, and Susan Barney, and then Jay and myself. So it's a big group and a good group that's really, in the last meeting or so, we've accomplished quite a bit. Quick history, we started our first meeting on December 7th of 2020, so just a little over a year ago. And we've had 10 meetings to date. We meet for basically an hour and a half each once a month. And our next meeting is going to be on the 17th. We'll be coming up, and we're looking forward to tackling the last 2 or 3 issues that are before us. So I'm going to summarize what has changed, what the amendments are at this point. And the first ones I'm going to go through are the ones that we basically everyone's agreed to. And I'm going to end with the 3 different sections that we're still talking about. So section 1 is about the regional school committee. And as you know, probably know, there are 5 ways that school committee members can be elected. And you've chosen one, or your district did many years ago, that says that members of both towns will vote for members from either town on the school committee. but the top 5 vote getters from Templeton will be on the committee, and the top 3 vote getters from Phillipston will be also on the committee. Obviously, that is a rotating thing. But that law also says that when you do vote that way, you're supposed to be having elections only every other year in the fall at the state election time. But your community many years ago got special dispensation from the legislature to hold your elections every year at the same time as the towns are having their election. So one of the things that's been added here to your agreement is, in case your 2 towns for some reason choose not to have your town elections on the same day, there needs to be a mechanism for the school district to have their election in a different way, so that the district will have some ability to hold its own election. And actually, Jay and I have just found some additional information in the last couple of days, which we will share with the RAC on the 17th, and look at that to see what are the options that a community would have, or the district would have, to have their elections if the 2 towns decide to have theirs on different days. The other thing that's been changed in this section is that the select board has been included in participating in filling a vacancy on the school committee. So if there is a vacancy on the school committee, the select board from that town where there's a vacancy, and the school committee members from that town will get together, and they together will appoint someone to finish that person's term who's vacated their position. Okay, section 2 is about the type of the regional district. These are both kind of obvious things, but they weren't written in there. This clarifies that the district is for students who live in your 2 towns. That's pretty obvious, but again, it wasn't written there. And we've also added that the state law allows your district to join or form an educational collaborative, which obviously is happening with your district already, but it was not stated there. Section 3 is about tuition and assignment of students. There was no change there. Section 4 is about location and lease of the district schools. Sort of the main thing that was done there is that the non-existent school names have been deleted from the regional agreement, and basically saying, because we know that the names of schools change over time, and so there's just a reference that says all of the district schools have to be in one of your 2 towns. So it's just kind of cleaning things up there. And there's also language that allows the district to lease elementary schools. Now, obviously, that's something that you've been doing, but again, it wasn't stated in your regional agreement. Section 5 about the budget. There's actually a lot of new language in this section, but there's nothing changed about what you're doing and how you've been doing it. It's basically the same, but there's language that over time, as we have worked with other communities, the Department of Education wants to have certain language in there, more spelling out a formula for how you do the assessments. And so it didn't change, again, didn't change anything, but it's more clearly spelled out. And there's some general law language has been added that talks about the process to increase and approve budget. So as an example, let's say on July 2nd, a boiler blows up in your high school and you do not have money in your budget to fix it. So perhaps the school committee might say, well, we have money in our E&D account, which can cover that. Or maybe we have money in some kind of a grant that can cover that. And so that's what you choose to do. Well, that technically would increase your budget, but it would not increase the assessment to either of your towns. So that information would go to the select boards. And in cases where we've seen in other places, the select board would say, well, if you're not increasing our assessment, and we know that you need the new boiler, we will not spend the money on having a special town meeting to ask the voters if that's okay. So they will approve that, or I'll let that be approved without voter approval. However, if the school committee then, after everything has been settled, wants to increase the budget and it increases the assessment to either of your towns or both, then it has to go back to the communities for votes. So there's a fail-safe method there. If the budget has to be increased for any reason, certainly the voters will find out about it. Okay, section 7 is about notice of debt authorization. Again, some language was added, which is from the Mass General Law, which is almost word for word there. And it says that there are only 2 ways that the school committee can incur debt. One of them, which is what almost every school district does, and what you have been doing, is if you want to incur debt, it goes to the select boards, goes to the towns, and people get to vote on whether or not that's okay for the school committee to incur a debt. Both towns would have to approve it in order for the school committee to incur the debt. But there is a second way from the law, and that is the school committee could hold one general meeting that would include people from both of your communities. And whatever the vote is, the total vote, not by community, but the total vote at that meeting can decide whether or not the school committee can incur the debt. So as you might imagine, that is not a very good political thing to do, especially where your 2 towns are in different sizes. Obviously, if the 2 towns in a region were 50-50, then that might not be so bad. But where you're closer to 80-20 or 85-15, it would not obviously be a great way to handle things. Section 8 is about transportation. There's no change there. Section 9 is about amending. How do you amend this regional agreement? There are no changes to that section. Section 12 is about conflicts, and there's no change. Conflicts is related to if your regional agreement conflicts with state law in any way. Obviously, the state law would override what's in your regional agreement. That's pretty obvious, but that's already in your current regional agreement. It's been in the last one, so there's no change there. Section 13, the review, there's no change there, and that just says that the school committee is obligated to review this regional agreement every 10 years to determine whether or not you think that there are things that need to be changed. So again, no substantive change there. Section 14 is about effective date and jurisdiction. That's obviously at the end of the agreement. It's just, and if this agreement gets updated, there will be new dates put in there. Okay, so let's go back to the unresolved issues that we'll be talking about on the 17th. First one is in section 6 about apportionment of costs. Again, this is about how your towns are assessed for the budget of the school district. And there's a fairly long section, and all of the parts have been approved except one. And this language is still being negotiated. It's about the payment of capital debt costs for any elementary school. It's a little bit vague in your regional agreement, and there needs to be some language to decide, are both towns responsible for paying for elementary debt, for debt in an elementary school in another town. So we're obviously still wrestling with that, and that was a big issue that we knew about before this whole process started, and we have spent a fair amount of time talking about it. We're going to keep talking, and hopefully we can come to some consensus about it. Second issue is section 10, adding additional towns. Again, most of this has been approved. there was some new language added, which gives the school committee some additional ability to request, for a better, sake of a better word, buy-in money from a town who wants to come into your region. So let's say you just built a new high school 2 years ago, and the debt started on that from both of your towns, and another town wants to join your region. So this would say, the school committee could say to this third member town, we would like to have you join our district, but we would like to have you pay some of the back debt that you did not have to pay because your kids are going to be coming to this new school. And we would like you to pay, say, 1 year back year of pay. I think that the RAC members are generally in agreement that it doesn't say what it is specifically, but they're in agreement that that is basically okay. But they're one of the communities is going to present some language at our next meeting that would put some parameters on the school committee for what you could ask for. So, for example, if your high school were 15 years old, that probably is going to would say it's not reasonable to ask the new member town to pay the past 15 years of debt on the high school. I don't know what it's going to be. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm guessing from the discussion that it's going to have some parameters on what the school committee can do for buy-in. And so I'm not expecting that that's going to be something that's going to hold us up significantly. Section 12, withdrawal of member towns. Excuse me. One of the member towns representatives, I believe, at our next meeting is going to offer some language that would allow either community to withdraw just its elementary grades from the region and leave the secondary school intact. So we have talked about this, and as you might imagine, in order for that significant change to be made, you would have to have a whole new, go through the regional agreement amendment process. So, and I think Jay's, in my opinion, it isn't necessary to put in there. It's obviously okay to put it in there to just let people know that that's a possibility, but it would take the process to go through with a committee, going through the school committee, going through the towns, all to vote on the whole agreement again if one town wanted to pull out its elementary grades. But anyway, we're going to be talking about that, and it's certainly something that can happen, and I don't think it'll be a major stumbling block as well. So what are the next steps? Where are we? As you can see, or as I think you can see, that we've gone through the whole agreement a number of times. I think we're in pretty good shape with these three issues to resolve. Again, I believe that 2 of the 3 we will be able to resolve in a reasonable manner, hopefully on the 17th. The one remaining issue that's going to take some more discussion, perhaps, is about the debt issue for elementary schools. And so we're going to continue talking about that. So the next steps are, we'll continue talking about these things. If we get consensus on these 3 issues, there will be a vote, and then it'll be sent to the school committee. If there's no consensus, or if we can't get consensus on that or any other issues, then we will look at alternatives. What can we do? If we get to a point where we say, we've done everything we can, we're almost there, we probably can't finish this 1 section or 3 sections, whatever, we will look at alternatives. And Jay and I have been looking at and thinking about alternatives that we'll be willing to address or able to address if that comes to pass. But our hope is that we certainly can come to consensus on the whole agreement. If that happens, we will be sending it to for legal opinions to both towns' legal counsel, to the district's legal counsel, and to DESE's legal counsel. We have been sharing this with the ESE along the way. The two people in the DESE who are responsible for regional school district agreements, we've been talking with them all along, and we would not be presenting something to the town attorneys if we thought that the DESE was not going to accept it. So that's where it'll go. And then when we get through that process, it will go to the regional school committee. The regional school committee will have an opportunity to review the whole document, ask questions. You will be able to make adjustments to it. You can certainly override the regional agreement, amendment committee if you want, and come up with something that you feel comfortable presenting. Once you do that, it will go to the select boards in both of the towns for them to put on the next town meeting. And then if voters approve, both member towns obviously are going to have to approve it. It can't be approved by just one member town. So if it's approved by both member towns, it will be sent to DESE for the commissioner to sign off. And again, we will know that ahead of time because our representatives at DESE and their legal counsel will have already said they believe what we send them is legal from their point of view. So the commissioner, we assume, will sign off on it. And then this would go into effect on a July 1st. Now, it's conceivable that if the commissioner signed off on this on June 29th, the school committee, you might say, well, it's not reasonable to start this on July 1st. We're going to wait a year and start this. But the fact that there's nothing changing in terms of the budget, really the budget process. So Anne Marie, for example, wouldn't have to be scrambling that this new agreement changes how she was supposed to present the budget or how that whole process worked. It's conceivable that you could start this on a July 1st fairly soon after it's agreed to by everybody. But again, it's possible that you might want to wait for another year. So I've gone through this pretty quickly. If you have any questions, then Jay and I would be happy to try to answer them. Can I stop sharing my screen, or do you want me to be able to go back to some slides?
I think if you could stop sharing your screen for the moment, if we do need you to do it again, we can certainly do that. But this way, at least you can see everybody and if anyone has a question. So just thank you so much for coming tonight and presenting an update to the school committee of what the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee has been up to. Thank you and Jay for your facilitation of the committee and getting us to this point. I'll look to the committee. Does anybody have any questions at this point? It was a pretty comprehensive presentation, but is there anything that anyone would like to ask at this point?
There's going to be a quiz on this later.
Yeah, it'll be multiple choice though, so it'll be okay. So it looks like we don't have any questions. I think the only question that I have is, looking at this is January, and I know we're hoping to get the last 3 items ticked off, hopefully at the next meeting on January 17th, I believe.
Yes.
Is it realistic to think that this could get in a position to be sent to the towns for inclusion on a warrant for their Maytown meetings? Are we in a tight time frame, or is it realistic to think that it could happen?
When is the deadline for your, Tim, maybe you could tell us, when's the deadline for warrant articles for your warrant?
I don't know if there's anybody on here who can answer that.
So if for some reason we could complete this on the 17th of January, I think it's very realistic that but I think there needs to be communication in your communities There should be a forum or two, maybe one in each, probably one in each community, to tell people kind of like what we just did and what's happening, to make sure that they understand fully before the town meeting. So there needs to be time for people to absorb things, and it's possible. I know I was on a regional agreement amendment committee in my town in Boxborough, for Acton Boxborough, and we took this out to some forums, and a couple of people had some good ideas, and the committee went back and made some adjustments based on what we heard in the community. So you need to have time to do that and make sure that people understand fully about what's happened and what's going to happen. And but it's conceivable. But if we get into February and March and we haven't resolved things, then it's probably not realistic. And I don't know, do you have fall town meetings in both of your towns?
I know Templeton does. Phillipston does not always have a fall meeting. So
yeah, so that might be another possibility, or it could wait till the following spring.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I don't see any. Again, I want to thank you. I also want to thank all the members of the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. I know it's been challenging this past year meeting virtually. It's not always as efficient as being around the table with one another, but I think it's been great that people have been able to come together and make so much progress virtually, because I know I speak for myself, and I could probably speak for many members of the committee. It's not as easy when we're not together in the same room. So I want to thank them. I do just want to bring up that under our items not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours before the meeting, we do need to address an appointment of a new member to the Templeton group, that there's been a replacement. So we'll do that because we want that person on board and approved by the school committee for the January 17th meeting. We don't meet again until the 19th. So I will bring that up there, but I want to give everybody a heads up that that's coming under that particular agenda item. Dr. Kazavant, do you want to add anything? I know that you have been there to support the team, and Hank, I know you're on the committee. Jeff, unfortunately, who is also the chair of the committee, couldn't be with us tonight. He's got an emergency at home. But is there anything that either of the two of you want to add before we let Mac and Jay take leave and enjoy the rest of their evening?
It's been challenging.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Okay, well, I thank you, Mac and Jay, for coming before us and giving us a great presentation. And we look forward to an update from the next meeting, and hopefully some sort of resolution. It'd be really good to get this moving and get in the right path to have this approved by the towns and bring it to the state and get some sign off from everybody so that we can check this off as finally being done. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sure Hank or Chris or anybody can give you an update on the 19th. If you have a meeting, we'll be able to tell you where we're at.
Great.
Yep.
Excellent.
Right. Thank you.
Well, thank you and good night.
All right. Good night.
All right. Okay. Just a housekeeping notice. Mrs. Matson has joined us. She joined the group at 5:47. So Mrs. Matson is on the call with us. So hello, Lori. Next up, on the agenda is the high school program of studies. Are we prepared? Do we want to hold off a little bit more? Because we have a couple of other pieces of business we can do first.
Yes, Mr. Young messaged me and said that he would be available at 6:30 if that was appropriate.
Okay, yeah, that would be fine. We can move on, and when he joins us, if we're at a logical place to jump back, or you know, he can wait in the wings, and we can get to the program of studies and those changes. So let's go ahead and move on, and we're going to get into the budget. And I know that there hasn't been much movement from the state level, other than I believe the governor announced that he is hoping to have his preliminary numbers out, maybe even earlier than they normally are. But you know, I'll be Missourian, you can show me and I'll believe it, because we'll see. So if that happens, that'll be good, because we'll have numbers a little early, but we'll see what happens. What I do want to just kind of preface this, we're going to probably focus mostly on the FY22 budget. So I will turn that over to Ms. Geister in just a moment, because we've got some good news with E&D certification, and she's going to just tell us about our next meeting and what to expect with that. And then we can spend some time with ESSER and FY23 with whatever new information. I don't think there's much, but we can go over that. So I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Geister, and obviously Dr. Kazavan, if you have anything to add to the discussion, I will put it in your hands.
All right, thank you. So our E&D has been certified. It came in at $740,828, which is good. So now we can, now that it's been certified, now we have options in fixing the FY22 budget where we had the ESSER funds covering the minimum local contribution for both towns. So what this means is, with the amount that was certified, you have a few options to vote at the next meeting to cover the ESSER MLC that we cannot use per DESI guidelines. So one of your options for the next meeting would be, you could use some of this E&D, $189,832 to cover the FY22 shortfall. That would still leave you a balance of $550,996 as of July 1 that you could put towards your FY23 budget like we would normally do. You could do nothing with E&D. You could lower our FY22 budget by $189,000, or basically, I guess those are your only two choices. The $189,000 that is in ESSER, what you would lower the budget with from the general fund, you'd have to just move those expenses over to the ESSER grant. I think it would be cleaner to use E&D, but the choice is yours.
Great. And as I said, this will actually be on our agenda for our next meeting. So if it's the will of the committee to choose one of those options, we'll go ahead and vote that. Just because we have some new members that aren't familiar with the entirety of the budget certification process, once we certify, in this case, we'd be recertifying a budget, that triggers a process where our treasurer has to send out a notice to the towns. And it's even if we wouldn't be changing the town's allocation. I was kind of chuckling, Anne Marie, as there is a third option, but we pretty much took that off the table, which would be to ask the towns to contribute more money, which would mean town meetings for them and a lot of overhead that is, in my mind, really not necessary nor financially prudent for us at this point. So, we'll, at the next meeting, Anne Marie will present us with the two income statements so we can look at them to see what that means. And then at the will of the committee, we can take a vote and hopefully recertify so that we can put the certification of our FY22 budget to rest. So we can fully focus on FY23 and where we go. So does anyone have any questions on that? And I know that we'll get more information, but if you have any specific questions, we can kind of talk about that at this point. Okay, I don't see any. So with that being said, I guess I would ask you as well, Anne Marie, FY22, you had mentioned to us at our last meeting that we had put a budget freeze in place. And because we're watching obviously every penny and we had a lot of things at play, maybe you could give us a quick update on where we are budget wise with FY22, and then we can start talking about ESSER and FY23.
The freeze is still in place. I honestly don't think it's going to go away. All the administrators know if there's something that they need, they just get in touch with me and we talk about it. We figure out how it's being funded, if it's a necessity. So our bottom line is holding. It's not, it's just holding. It's not in danger, but it's not as high as we've seen in the past. at this time of year. So that's why I just want to keep a real close eye on it. I mean, we still have 6 months of things that could pop up. So.
Right. Okay. Do we want to talk a little bit about ESSER funds? I don't know if there's been any real updates or anything that we need to talk about as far as any changes that we see coming with the ESSER funds. And I don't know, Dr. Kasvin, if you kind of talked a little bit about the towns and their ARPA funds and obviously how that might play into FY23, and then we can kind of wrap those discussions up, because I don't think that there's any real new information since we last met to talk numbers, because we're still waiting on everything, really.
So from our perspective, I have reached out to both towns formally and basically sent them a list of what we would like if they were so inclined, meaning each town select board, to allocate ARPA funds to the school. And it never works for me, but I'm gonna try very hard to share the screen and see if I can actually make it work. So, oh, look at that. Miracles do exist. So what we did, and these are in order of importance. So you heard Anne-Marie earlier, just moments ago, speak about what was essentially ESSER 2 offset. So if you remember, the state said, yeah, sure, go ahead, allocate ESSER 2 to help towns out with their minimum local contribution. And then honestly, weeks later, after town meetings and votes and everything, said, no, you can't do that. And then the state said, and by the way, you can't utilize this. So you in our end of year report, it was going to be very difficult. So the solutions, as you just heard them, one of the ways is to, in essence, recoup those ESSER 2 funds that were at one point allocated, right? Because now they're just kind of hanging out there, if you so to speak, right? That they can't offset the minimum local contribution. They kind of in limbo. So we asked both towns to consider offset using ARPA funds, in essence, giving us that money back, right? Which would go right back into all the things that we're doing because of COVID, all the different teaching positions, et cetera, and we'd be able to utilize the E&D as well. We initially intended is, to help with the FY23 budget. So in any event, what you see before you here is a list that was identical, and it was sent to both member towns. And if you can see it, I don't know, just let me know if it's not big enough. But if you remember, it was $189,000 that I'm rounding, which was the offset, combined offset minimum local contribution. And we have formally asked both Templeton and Phillipston for their proportioned share as we do almost with any type of allocation in that sense, right? So it's 86% would be the Templeton portion and 13%. And we went down this list as far as we dared to go, quite frankly. There's no end to a wish list or a want or a need list, but as I had communicated prior, we stayed with capital projects that would otherwise and eventually cost member towns money, quite frankly, right? So we didn't go as far as the roof, which would be something that would be an astronomical cost, right? But we did do things like the HVAC upgrades, which, as this committee knows, we did a ton of work last year utilizing a lot of ESSER funds, general funds to upgrade our HVAC system at the middle and high school to no expense of either town. And we are roughly $125,000 short of left right, to complete those upgrades. And the list kind of cascades down, but replacement internet core switches, you know, we are very dependent on internet now at this point, and have been for quite some time. And those core switches are an important piece to what we do. And then we looked at things like family subsidies for extended day. I'd like to say that, you know, we thought of this all by ourselves. We did not. Every great idea has been stolen, so to speak. And when reaching out to other communities, we saw what they had, I guess requested, is that could we then use these monies to, an example, either not completely offset, but certainly reduce the burden on our members, our parents, for extended day. There was the athletic field drainage, and then north side, drainage. And so a lot of these things is that really to try to assist our member towns in monies that we think we know eventually that we're going to have to ask the towns for, and utilize ARPA funds to do that without having to maybe increase taxes or something to that effect, right? Are we assured that we're going to get all, what is it, 7? No. It's like, well, Santa was just here, and I don't know many children who get everything on their list. I could think of 3 who did not. You ask in the order of importance, and we'll see what Santa can do for you. But clearly the top 2, the 2 top, number 1 and number 2, are our top priority, which are, of course, the MLC offset and the HVAC upgrades. Everything below that really are important, but when you need to triage these type of things, this is what we came up with. I think I'll stop there and stop unless you have a question in regards to projects. Let me just simply say that I've already met with the town of Templeton, and I have a meeting with the town of Phillipston, Susan.
January 12th.
And Marie, January 12th, in order to explain our request or to make a in-person formal request.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the information that Dr. Casavant just went over?
I have a question. In terms of approvals, since there's a Phillipston portion and a Templeton portion, how exactly would that work? If is there a mechanism by which both towns will just naturally agree to the same things, or how do we manage it if one town agrees to certain things and another town agrees to another? I'm just not familiar with how that would work with the ARPA funds.
That's a great question. So the select board are the authority in this matter. They can, they would by vote authorize or approve X. So I guess if you take it just from a dollar standpoint, and I don't want to make anything up, but I mean, if grand total $300,000 was given to the school, I'm trying to think of, something like that, and it didn't quite cover the HVAC upgrades, well, then there'd be we'd say, okay, well, then we'll definitely take care of the offset because that affects both FY22 and FY23, and that's very important. And we will complete as much as possible for the HVAC as money allows. So you know what I'm saying? So I think that again, I don't think it'll break down like this. It might very well say, okay, both towns look at this and say, look, this is what we're going to do. You figure out, you figure out the rest. And then some decisions will have to be made.
If this money is given to us, it has to be treated like a grant. Mm-hmm. So it will be in its own separate little pool. So if we were to get the offset amount, it would be its own like pool of money, and expenses would go against that. That would help our general fund. So for instance, if they decided one town wanted to give us a portion of the HVAC upgrade, it would be in its fund and we would do the upgrade to whatever that dollar amount is.
I don't want to misspeak, but when I say that these are unrestricted funds, given the way the mechanism works, it literally, as I understand it from other municipalities, it literally is a check. In a sense, no one walks a check over, but you understand that it's money that, will sit in and we have to figure that out. If I'm not mistaken, Anne Marie, was it a gift account or revolving? I forget, what was the mechanism where that would sit?
It probably would go into a revolving account for the time being, but it's treated like a grant. So it's coming to us sort of for the specific project that we requested, but it does not have any strings attached.
Right. A town could, in fact, and I know of one that simply said, we're going to give you X percentage of this, use it as you and the school committee feel necessary. So when I say unrestricted, I don't really mean that in the pure bookkeeping sense, but they could just simply say, look, this is what we're going to do, make sure it goes to X, Y. I doubt any town in the world would just hand over a check and just say, use it as your leisure. But again, if it's earmarked, then yeah, definitely we would honor that.
Okay, anybody have any other questions? I just have one. So in this example here, we wouldn't be constrained by, the percentage matching between the towns. So if only one town wanted to give us money, or one town had more money to give and it didn't have the right split, that won't matter because this is from a grant or a gift type of thing.
Yes.
Right. We just broke it down just to be transparent. If folks wanted to go along, say that line, right, just to go along the lines of the proportion split, then that's why we left it like that. Nope. Sorry, guys. Can't. I lost something. Yeah. All right, here we go.
So you've shared the screen. Now let's see if you can unshare it.
Ooh, okay. You guys are asking quite a bit here. Hold on. Oh, look at that. All right. Good.
Great. Okay. Any other questions on ESSER, ARPA, and every other acronym related to these COVID monies? Okay. Seeing none, let's just spend a minute or two talking about FY23. I did want to remind everybody that we do have an all boards meeting scheduled for, I'm going to try and wing this. I believe it's January 24th. Is that correct? It's a Monday.
Yeah.
And I believe we said what time?
I believe it was 5:30, but let me just double check.
Yeah, I thought it might have been a little later because 6 o'clock.
Actually 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if everybody could put that down, it's we've invited the Templeton Select Board and their advisory committee. We've sent invites out to the Phillipston Select Board and their finance committee to come meet with us to present about the FY23 budget. I think we may also be working on a presenter to share some information. We kind of try to do that at all of these types of meetings, just to kind of share school finance information with all of the participants, because and I know for many members it's going to be very helpful too, but we're kind of in the weeds of it and people don't have a clue when it comes to how some of these things work. So we've tried to do that, and I know Dr. Kazvan's working on potentially securing us a speaker, so we'll see if that comes through. So please put that on your calendars, and it will be hopefully in person. I think we've done it in the library in the past, but more to come with logistics if that needs to change. Other than that, For FY23, I don't know if Dr. Kazavan or Ms. Geister, if you have anything you want to share. I know there hasn't been a lot of movement on, we don't know anything much different than we did the last time.
I'll let Anne Marie, of course, speak to the specifics, but, you know, obviously we are getting we're getting the budget together. So you know, these numbers are starting to, we don't have all the numbers, no, but certainly, you know, we have enough to kind of move forward, and that's what we'll keep doing. If the governor is so inclined to, you know, deliver his budget sooner rather than later, that's great. We still, though, will need our insurances, and I know that those are, you know, we wait for those with, you know, with bated breath. But Anne-Marie, do you have anything to add to that part of it, or?
No, pretty much what you said. You know, those numbers, insurances and things, they don't usually come until beginning to mid-February. Those are like the last pieces. I'm finishing up working with like tech and facilities on some of their numbers and just plugging in things as we get them.
Okay, great. You know, we'll look forward to, you know, whatever information you may have for our next meeting. Obviously that will be the last meeting before we do have the tri-board meeting, but you know, we'll be, I guess, fast and furious once the governor's budget is released and we can see what that means as far as our Chapter 70 numbers, because obviously who knows what surprises, you know, maybe we'll get bonus, you know, the per pupil monies again, and then we'll have it taken away from us. But, you know, one can hope. So great. Anyone have any questions on FY23 at this point? Okay, we will move on then. I am going to jump backwards to the program of studies. Unfortunately, it looks like our high school principal, Mr. Young, is held up and can't join us, but we do have Ms. Calise here who can probably speak to the program of studies. It was attached to the agenda and sent out last week for everybody to review. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate to kind of give us a quick walkthrough. And if anyone has any questions or needs, you know, just it's hard with the screen share to see. So please feel free to just jump in and ask your question, and hopefully we can get through this. And then we can see if the committee wants to take a vote on approving the changes. And you're muted.
Okay. So it's pretty straightforward this year. You'll see we started with the approved program studies from last year. That's the first bullet on your screen. And then Colby, Mr. Young and his departments went through the program studies, and anything that was proposed for deletion has a strike through, and anything proposed for addition has a highlight. So it's pretty straightforward. Very few substantive changes except for the early college area. So Mr. Young gave us these 4 statements at the top to explain the rationale for changes. So on page 6, there was a change because MCAS and graduation requirements have been updated to reflect the current competency determination requirements, which I believe were extended for next year. There are some early college dual enrollment descriptions that have been updated to reflect the possibility of the early college designation, which we're moving toward, and it's looking, you know, it's looking good. Of course, we don't have the final word on that yet, but this will put us in a position to be able to offer those courses once our application is approved. And in fact, the program studies with those descriptions has to be part of what was submitted or what is submitted. The existing courses descriptions have been updated with some minor changes. There's a couple places where there's a new course or a new description of a course, but not too many. And then new courses have been added to support early college. So this is a little different from number 2. Number 2 is the actual courses you would take in an early college dual enrollment pathway. Number 4 is courses that they want you to have leading up to those courses to get students ready for early college. So it's a real thorough system to have students be successful in this endeavor. So the first is career explorations, which would be a grade 8 course. And then early college prep, which would be a grade 10 course. We're expanding, this does not relate to early college directly, but we do expand Project Lead the Way, which is tangentially connected to early college, and then dual enrollment courses. So I'm not going to scroll because that makes everyone dizzy, but you'll be able to see, I'll just do a quick, the first thing we see, and then I'll stop. You'll see it's very obvious when anything has been changed. It's been highlighted or it has a strike through.
So let me throw it out.
Oh, Mr. Young is here.
You're
So.
here. You came in right at the right time. Ms. Calise has given us a great introduction to the hard work that you and your team put together in prepping this document for us. So she saved you some talk time.
Great. I appreciate that. And I apologize. I had a little bit of a family emergency. Otherwise I would have been here from the get-go. So thank you.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I was just actually going to throw it out to the committee, since we have had time to review this, to see if there were any questions from the committee that they would like answered, or any comments. And then we can kind of take it from there. So I'll throw it out to the committee. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Young at this point?
I had a couple questions. They're less to do with the changes specifically and more to do just with learning about the program of studies. The first one being, I saw under the AP courses, having taken them many years ago myself, I remember there being a fee to take the test at the end, and that everyone is required to take that test. Knowing that we have some students where economically that may be a big ask for them. I did see that there's a discount available, but are there scholarships available in the districts or support through the school, so that those students do not put, I would never want to see a student left behind, and I was wondering if you could expand on any of that at all.
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Young answer this, but it would never be the case that a student lacking the fee would not be able to take the course. Did we lose Mr. Young?
Nope, I'm here. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so
moved in my screen.
It's a really great question. And it's one that I would say that if I understand correctly, I know that this school committee has grappled with. I know that Ms. Calise has thought carefully about, along with Dr. Cassavant. So there are scholarships, and we typically are able to find the money to support a student that wants to take the AP. Where it is, and I want to be really candid, and this is sort of the nature of AP being challenged, like having benefits and pros and cons, is that if I'm a student and I'm looking at taking 3 or 4 APs, the thing that sometimes we can't always control for is behind the scenes. Has there been a conversation that maybe we're unaware of, that a student is doesn't want to take an AP because they're concerned about the exam, right? That type of thing, where if they're taking multiple. But if we know about those students, we know that the financials are going to be an issue. I think what Kate said perfectly is we will find a way, and we always do, to cover that bill. But this, to kind of answer the question, pan out just a little bit. These are the reasons for things like the Project Lead the Way program. These are why we are considering and thinking a lot about the early college opportunities, because we know that can potentially be a barrier. Sometimes if we don't, it's the barriers that we don't even know about that are the biggest challenges. And so we try to identify those, and we try to make sure students are certainly covered. So we think we have it pretty well situated, but it's a dance we do every year. And I know that this conversation is one that will probably come up every year because it is the downside of AP, right?
Okay. And thank you very much. That was a
Sure.
thorough answer to my question. I appreciate that. My second question was related to, first of all, this is the first time I've spent this much time with our program of studies.
Thank you.
Scanned. This year I read, and there's a very vast list and rich list of different courses that students can take. And I'm wondering, it was very clear to me that what the new courses are and how we're cycling those in. I was wondering, how do you also make determinations on what to cycle out? What maybe, is losing its relevance, or, just people signing up for those courses is going downhill over time. At what point or how would you decide to remove a course from the program of studies due to low enrollment or other decisions like that?
So another really good question. So I'll take an answer. I'll answer that, and then, Ms. Calise or Dr. Cassavant might have some more longitudinal understanding. What I would say is, number one, our sort of magic number is 10. So I couldn't sit there and say our classes are always larger than 10, but we're really, we want to be thoughtful about the resources and how things are allocated at the district level. The truth of it is, sometimes what comes up as a program is incredibly valuable. And even if it is for a smaller contingent of students, I mean, that is what the high school is we are trying to fulfill every need that we possibly can. So, if courses are habitually under 10, then that would be where we would look to remove it. What I would say, in the spirit of all transparency with the school committee, over the last couple of years, my recommendation to central office and to this group when asked is to really not remove things from the program of studies unless we are really seeing undersubscription to that course year after year after year. And we know that there isn't going to be the potential of student interest in the future. And one of the reasons for that is sometimes we fit the course to the personnel or vice versa. So especially in an era of COVID, sometimes we don't necessarily know what it is that we're going to need until some limitations come up, right? For example, if it's a real challenge to hire a teacher in a certified content area, but we can hire a highly qualified teacher in a different area, it would make sense to have a course on tap in the program of studies that we know that would be taught at a high caliber for students, right?
Yeah.
So really, I think that's where things have stood the last couple of years, but I really defer to, Mrs. Calise's thoughts on that too.
I just want to add to that because a course is in the program of studies doesn't mean it runs every year. So that's a clarification to understand, and that kind of marries up with what Mr. Young just said. And we, it's this number 10 is kind of a rule of thumb, but it really is just a rule of thumb, because if we had a situation where we had students, for example, prepared for an advanced foreign language, well, that might be a course that we would run or find another way to give that child that opportunity. So it's really, it's a bar we look at, but then we have to look at other factors that come into play. But we will look at what courses we are going to run next year. And the other part of that is we need to, and we have started to have this conversation about having the guidance department work together with me and Mr. Young and others to determine if a course is going to run every year, can a kid project that? Like, in other words, you're coming in as a freshman and you want to take this certain project lead the way course. well, that might only run in your sophomore, junior year or your sophomore, senior year. Like just really to project that out, because as we're a small school and we have a lot of courses for a small school. And as we add more courses, we're not going to be able to run every course every year, but we want students to have those opportunities. So we're going to have to look at that kind of programming by class, by freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors.
And Ms. Smith, the last thing that I would add, and thanks for asking the question. As you can tell, we sort of enjoy weirdly talking about this, right? So you made the mistake of asking. You know, one of the other things too is sometimes the students determine it, right? So if we have a couple different electives out there, right, we open those up to the students, and when they select, then we determine, okay, we can run one and not the other. So maybe one year we don't run sports marketing, but for example, right now, you know, we have some students that, you know, had that been touted a little bit more, you know, you could have seen that one, you know, in place of another one. And so sort of there is some ebb and flow in terms of what the students want to do in terms of their interests. So we try to leave that open in that regard too, but you know, sometimes we might only be able to run 2 out of the 3 or something like that. Yeah.
Great. Anything else, Jen?
Nope. No. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
They were good. Thank you. You know, being on the committee for so long, you know, these are really great questions that I take for granted. So I'm glad that you asked them. There is no such thing as, what do they say, a dumb question. The only ones that are dumb are the ones that aren't asked. So please, you know, continue to scour and come up with questions. Anybody else have any questions on the program of studies as presented? I am just going to make one comment before I look to see if we do want to make a motion. As we've said in the past, you know, we'll approve this. And I know that one thing I want to say is that thank you for getting to this very early. I know that the early college approval has something to do with that. But having, you know, reading the weekly memo that Mr. Young puts out to the high school, I think it's awesome that the student body is going to get to see this and start picking their classes sooner. So it gives much more time, and that's just awesome. Yes, Kate, do you want to add?
I just want to thank you for that comment, because it is a direction we want to move in the future. Having the program studies ready earlier enables Mr. Young. We have a timeline actually this year, and Mr. Young is going to, you know, next week, this week, choose courses that are going to go into the schedule for kids to pick and so forth. And it really does get the ball rolling for the scheduling. Our goal is to have that done sooner. And so I think you can look to see this happening sooner in the future as well.
That's great. And I think, you know, extrapolating that to the committee level, as you look to have that information and feedback from the student body more in advance when it comes to budget time, if there's, you know, a real outcry from the student body for particular programming, and we may need to look at how do we reassign resources, and maybe you need to come to the committee and say, you know, this is really what we're looking for. So I think it's great, and it puts us in a good position to do all those things. So thank you, and please extend our thanks to your team that's worked on this to get this together. And you know, I keep my fingers crossed for that grant to come through, which it looks like we're in a great position to do so. So thank you. The other thing that I'll add is that I know we're approving this early, but as I think we've said in the past couple of times we've done this, if you do have additional updates as the year goes through or tweaks, you know, please feel free to bring it to the committee and we can review those things on an as-need basis. I know we just recently did it with, I think it was the fire program that we added in so that our students could take the Mounts Fire Safety. I forget exactly what the course's name was. So please feel free to come back to us at any point in time when things need to be adjusted. So with that being said, I would then entertain a motion to approve the high school program of studies for, this would be FY23 as presented.
So
I have a motion. I'm going to say Mrs. Matson, and do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second from, I'll give it to Mrs., because I want to say your name again, Miyashura. How's that? Getting good at it. Okay.
They get better.
Any questions or comments before we vote? Seeing none, we need to do a roll call since we are remote. And I do it in order that you've signed on. Mrs. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Mason.
Aye.
Mrs. Niamshura.
Aye.
Mrs. French.
Aye.
Mrs. Matson.
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So that is unanimous, and we have now approved the program of studies. So you may go forth and start planning the scheduling for next year. So thank you so much for that and getting it to us nice and early. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Next up, school committee comments. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to say? I don't think so. I just want to say, welcome back to everybody. I know this has been an interesting time coming back from school. I want to give a big thank you to our staff that took time out of their vacation to react to the DESE testing kits that were sent out that we distributed to staff coming in on your own time, on your vacation with the weekend. It's truly appreciated. So a big thank you to everyone who made that happen. I hope everybody had a great week and few days off. And I'm hoping that our numbers continue to stay on the low end of the scale so that we can continue on. Other than that, does anybody have anything else to add? Dr. Kazimir?
I do. Just real quick. Obviously I've thanked them profusely, but it was quite a team effort, and I appreciate the staff. I think we had 122 who came in over Saturday, Sunday to grab their packets. In terms of staff, as of right now, I'm going to knock. We're okay, but our student numbers, and we'll know more tomorrow because we did pool testing on Monday. It'll easily be dwarf our largest day or week, pardon me, in the past, although it's 2 weeks as well. So you'd have to take that into as a perspective. But we're hanging in there. But I want to thank Anne Marie and her husband who channeled their very best Black Friday, deals, get there early down in Franklin. There were only 3 sites for the entire state. And when I say Franklin had the lion's share, Central Mass, it was more of Western, Central, Eastern Mass that went to Franklin. And I want to thank her for getting there. Right at 8 o'clock. I'm sorry, Emery, you get there what?
20 minutes and 9.
Yeah, for us that's an hour away, so you factor that in. But thanks to everybody.
I think that's important to just comment on, because I don't think people realize that when the state decided they would provide these tests, there were 3 sites to do pickup. You could have gone to Pittsfield, you could have gone to, I forget where the one out east was.
Well, there was Pittsfield, Franklin, and I want to say somewhere near, like right, I want to say right on the Bourne Bridge almost. It was quite it was pretty diverse. If you were going to go someplace far.
Yeah, and it's funny because the Twitter feeds were all about, geez, I guess, Central Mass doesn't really exist, and everybody's like, well, that's not surprising. So, thank you, Anne Marie and your husband for doing that, because it's just indicative of, one, the reactive state that we always seem to be operating in, and then having to jump through hoops to actually get there. So as I said, it thanks to everybody, and that's great that you were able to do that for us.
You're welcome.
All right, any other comments? Okay, we're up to the other items not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours before the meeting. So I just found out today that Templeton has a person who is going to replace Matt Rivard on the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. Normally, we would wait for this until our next meeting, but as I mentioned earlier, the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee meets on the 17th. We don't meet till the 19th, and it's really important, knowing that they're kind of down to the nitty gritty, that we get this person appointed to the committee so they can participate and be a voting member. So I'm bringing this up under that agenda item. And John Kaplis is the person, and I think most everyone is familiar with Mr. Kaplis. He was on the select board for a while. So he is the new member. So I would entertain a motion to appoint John Kaplis to the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee, replacing Matt Rivard.
So moved.
I have a motion from Mr. Mason.
Second.
And I have a second from Mrs. Smith. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll do roll call. Let me get my list. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Mrs. Nimchura?
Aye.
Mrs. French?
Aye.
Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So Mr. Kaplis has been duly appointed to the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. So Mrs. Varney, if you could take care of the logistics around alerting him and whoever else, the committee as a whole, I'm sure that has happened. That would be great.
Will do. Thank you.
Next meeting is on Wednesday, January 19th. Hopefully in person in the Kiva. So that is our next meeting. That is a Wednesday. And next, we have executive session. So I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session for reason number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation with the UFCW and or the NDEA, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. This meeting will not return into open session immediately following. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Smith. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think that was Mrs. Mattson. And any questions or comments? And we'll do roll call. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Mrs. Niemchura?
Aye.
Mrs. French?
Aye.
Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes, so that is unanimous. We will be entering into executive session. We will not be coming back into public session. So at this point, I want to thank anybody who has joined and is watching us on our live stream for joining us, and we will be turning the recording off so that we can go into executive session. So thank you, everyone.